Okay, we've got the function y equals negative 8x minus 6, etc. Same function we've been talking about. And we want to ask what happens if x is close to negative 3/4, which is the value that would make this expression 0, and it'd make the whole thing 0. So if x is negative 3/4, then this is 0. If x is a little less than negative 3/4, then this turns out to be a little greater than 0. It turns out to be positive, but small. And if x is a little bit less than negative 3/4, turns out that I'm not sure I said that right. If x is a little greater than 3/4, this term is going to turn out to be negative. And if it's a little less than 3/4, it's going to turn out to be positive. Close to 0, but positive. But let's not worry about that for the moment. Let's worry about these other terms, because what we want to know is whether if x is on one side or the other of negative 3/4, is y going to be positive or negative? It turns out that, of course, this being 0 at negative 3/4 is going to be positive on one side, negative on the other. We'll worry about which side shortly. Okay, but first thing we got to do is figure out what the signs of these are. Okay, so if x is equal to negative 3/4, is this positive? Is this or negative? Is this positive or negative? Is this positive or negative? Well, it's easy to verify. You should figure that out for yourself without looking at my answers. And you should have paused by now and done that. Okay, so if you did that, you'll find that if x is equal to negative 3/4, all three of these terms are positive. And that's fairly easy to calculate. Negative 3/4 of 8 is less than, it has a magnitude less than 8, so the 8's going to be bigger than the negative 6 you're going to get from this. That's going to make this one greater. This one is clearly greater. Negative 3/4 isn't nearly as big as 6, so the 6 is going to dominate and make this positive. And this one, if you do it, 3/4 of 6 is 4.5. So if x is negative 3/4, this is going to be positive 4.5. Subtract 3, and you get 1.5, which is greater than 0. So all three of these turn out to be positive if x is equal to negative 3/4, and they're not that close to 0, so that if you let x go a little bit less or a little greater than negative 3/4, these things are still going to stay positive. So now, if x is slightly less than negative 3/4, well, I've got a mistake here because I didn't copy my negative, so I'm going to have to make a correction here. If x is slightly less than negative 3/4, it turns out then that negative 8x is going to be close to negative 6, but it's not going to be quite that negative. So that the negative here will be dominated by the negative 6. Okay, I'm sorry. If x is slightly less than negative 0.75, this is going to be, turns out, greater than 0. Okay. X is a negative number. The bigger that negative number gets, that is, the more negative it gets, the bigger the positive you get here. So that this thing is going to be bigger in, it's going to be positive and bigger in magnitude than the negative 6, and it's going to make this positive. So I'm going to have to change this to positive. As I said, I did this whole video a minute ago, and I forgot to copy the negative on the 8. So I'm going to have to change this result to positive, because of course you got a positive times a positive divided by a positive times a positive. Everything's positive. Now if x is slightly greater than negative 0.75, well, that's going to make this negative, which is going to make this, erase the positive to write a positive when it's wrong in the first place. That's going to make this negative. Now that's going to give us information about the graph of this function. Okay, what information do we have right now? We have the fact that we have zeros at -1, x equals -1, and -3/4. Now those are really close together. So we have zeros at these 2 points. Those 2 points are close together. We have zeros of the denominator when x equals, in this case, -1/2 or -6. So we're going to have a zero of the denominator here, and we'll get to the effect of those. What we know then is that at least for the zero at -3/4, okay, on this side of -3/4, the value of the function is going to be positive, and on this side of -3/4, the value is going to be negative, which means that near -3/4, the value of the function is going from positive to negative. So we draw a little segment here. Now I could enlarge that. Here's -1. Here's -3/4. So I've drawn a little segment that goes from positive to the left to negative on the right of x equals -3/4. Okay? Now I can do a similar analysis when x is close to -1. If x is equal to -1, then this is positive, this would be 0, this would be negative clearly, and this would be positive. So we have a positive, 0, negative, positive, so that and I think I said that wrong. This would be positive. Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a minute. I've actually got a meeting I've got to go to, so I'm going to cut it here, and we'll continue this. Understand what happens as x goes from a little less than -3/4 to a little greater than 3/4. We go from positive to negative, meaning that the graph goes from positive y to negative y, so it has to go through the 0, the way you see here. And you should go ahead and do the analysis for when x equals -1. I'll write that down rather than pointing at it, and you're going to need me to do that anyway.